there are no significant differences. And hey, we can cite this study saying, that looked at pea protein consumption versus whey protein consumption or something like that, or soy versus whey in people looking to gain muscle mass. So studies like that exist. There's also among the animal food consumption proponents, there's claims that, animal proteins are just vastly superior. I would say, if I can summarize in a succinct way without getting too bogged down in lots of nuances and details, there's definitely a case to be made that in general, an equivalent amount of animal protein, let's say 20 grams of chicken or fish or eggs or whey protein, is generally going to be superior to 20 grams of protein from lentils and rice and beans and grains and things like that. However, there are definitely studies, as I just mentioned, where they've actually looked in people who are resistance, and they've compared soy protein powder or rice protein powder or pea protein powder to whey, which is kind of considered the gold standard of animal proteins in terms of protein powders and resistance exercise in particular. And many of those studies have shown equivalent gains. So based on those studies, it's definitely clear that it's not really warranted to sort of position plant proteins as these just worthless, totally inferior things that aren't doing anything, and only animal proteins do something. That's definitely not the case. But in general, if you're a vegan or vegetarian, it is prudent to eat more overall protein and to sort of take extra care to go above and beyond your protein requirements by eating protein-rich plant foods, and by also, I would say ideally, given the importance, as you said, of avoiding sarcopenia and maintaining muscle mass, also considering using plant-based protein powders. So that would be my sort of general thoughts.
Those are great general thoughts too. And plant, if one's concerned about increasing mtor, which we've talked about on the show, not what you want when you start to get, I think, above age 40, you don't have to be as concerned if you're consuming plant-based protein. Do I have that correct?
Well, I would say there's a misconception around mTOR in general. I think it's been framed by a lot of, I would say, especially sort of vegan diet gurus, that mTOR is just this bad thing. And the more mTOR you have, the more disease you're going to have, the more cancer you're going to have, the shorter your lifespan is going to be. And there's actually a U-shaped curve between mTOR and lifespan, meaning too low of mTOR is just as harmful as too much. So you don't want to just avoid mTOR and be in a fasted state all the time and not eat any protein because you're afraid of mTOR. And resistance exercise also stimulates mTOR. The truth is, mTOR plays a vital role in our body as far as stimulating anabolic tissue building processes. We don't want to just frame it like it's this bad thing that we need to avoid all the time. But chronically stimulating mTOR, which is largely the result of like the standard American diet of just over consuming food and calories more broadly, beyond what your body needs, is and having too long of a feeding window from the time from your first bite of food to your last bite of food each day, and not allowing for adequate dips in mTOR and catabolic autophagy processes during the nighttime period, is absolutely toxic and will contribute to cancer. But at the same time, again, we need to avoid framing mTOR as a bad thing, and like the less we have of it. We want spikes of mTOR stimulation, particularly from resistance exercise, and we want to pair that resistance exercise with consuming plenty of protein to stimulate those anabolic muscle building processes.
So you mentioned consuming plenty of protein. Let's close the loop on protein. I know we're all individuals and the number can vary, but in your estimation, is there a general rule of thumb? If I want to maintain or build muscle mass, is it half a gram per pound, 2 gram? Like, how do you think about what is enough protein based on body weight?
Well, there's a number of studies. There's been studies where they've looked at young resistance training males and how to optimize muscle gain in response to lifting weights. There's also lots of studies in sort of middle-aged people who are looking to achieve fat loss, which is another important factor in both longevity, disease prevention, and energy levels. Having too much body fat in addition to too little muscle mass they're both big contributors to fatigue and disease and early death. And in that context, there's been meta-analyses of randomized controlled trials done where they've shown consistently that around zero point 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight, gram of protein per pound of body weight, or in kilograms, it's 1.1 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram per day, increases fat loss. So increases your fat loss results, preserves muscle mass or causes muscle gain, and preserves resting metabolic rate and leads to higher energy levels, all of which are critical for maintenance of fat loss and maintenance of good body composition after the dietary period is over. So I think somewhere in that range is optimal, which some people are going to perceive as high. I think, within the vegan crowd, they're going to say, oh my gosh, that's way too much. Really, we only need, 30 or 40 grams of protein per day. And that's what they have established is necessary for humans to stay alive. Well, that's the thing. That's true. That is the minimum amount required to stay alive. But there's a big distinction between what is the minimum required of something to be alive versus what's optimal for optimizing body composition or lifespan or energy levels.